Welcome to Siren Sundays. This show is focused on speaking with researchers, scientists, and practitioners of environmental sciences and all things conservation in the Bahamas. Because if you didn't know, the Bahamas is so much more than just beaches. You are now tuning in to our conservation conversation.
What's splashing? Welcome to season 8 of Siren Sundays. Today is episode 1, and we're so excited to have you. I'm your host, Lashanti the Siren, and today's guest is none other than Lakeshia Anderson-Rolle. This episode is proudly sponsored by Trifecta Group Bahamas. They partner with local organizations to develop triple bottom line by maximizing programs and project benefits to communities and the environment. The principal, Kelly, Ashley, and Armstrong, and team extend congratulations to Lashanti for season 8, as well as a congratulations to Lakeshia Anderson-Rolle for becoming the first female executive director of the Bahamas National Trust. So shout out to Trifecta Group Bahamas. You can follow them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Trifecta 242, and on Facebook it's Trifecta Group 242. So hope you guys can check them out. They are a great organization and our proud sponsors for today's episode. So that was a mouthful. We can dive right in. Welcome to the show, Lakeshia. I finally got you on the show.
Finally, yes. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and congratulations on your 8th season. That is a huge accomplishment. So, and for those who don't know, Lashanti and I have some history here. So I'm really happy to be on. I'm really happy to see the progress you've made with the show. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and again, congratulations to you on becoming first female executive director. I always believed in you. I knew it would happen one day. I thought it would happen when I was there, but I'm super excited to see you lead the Bahamas National Trust in a continued direction. Eric has a great startup, and you're going to just carry that baton straight through.
Awesome, I will.
Awesome. So I definitely, as I kind of alluded to with all the advertisements and in talking with people about this episode, I really wanted to get into who is Lakeshia Anderson-Rolle? What was your journey? Like, how did you get to where you are? And I always like to have people kind of start off by talking about, well, what was it at first that made you say that you even wanted to get into conservation? And I know that you actually did not originally go off to school to study anything related to conservation, correct?
Wow. So I didn't realize I told that story to others. So yes. So I really started off at Hampton University, and I started off in the field of electrical engineering. I actually started off pursuing a degree in electrical engineering. And, it really came down to me being a bit curious as to, how things worked. And I would always be the one in my younger days deconstructing gadgets and things like that. And there was also a family influence element to it as well, encouraging me, oh, you'll be a great engineer. But about a year and a half into it, I realized that, this was not the direction that I wanted to go in. And I needed to make a shift, and I needed to make a shift very fast. And so thankfully, Hampton University, which sits on the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, had a marine science program. And so I was able to transfer into the marine and environmental science program. And, it went from there. But just kind of going back, even before that, my childhood experience really helped to guide and lead me to where I am now. My father's from Andreson, from Bearing Point. And so he grew up around the water, and he is a keen naturalist. And so during my early childhood years, we would spend weekends fishing. And there were several occasions where he took me at a very young age. And still to this day, I'm like, did I really do that? He would take me out spear fishing. And I was, probably 11, 12 years old in East Grand, Bahama. And I can remember like it was yesterday, spear fishing with me in tow. And it was then that I grew to love and appreciate and respect the marine environment. And so making that shift was really important, and it was an easy thought. And so, I'm thankful to my family for, guiding me through the process, although, there was still that influence about the engineering degree. But, I'm really happy for the decision that I've made, and I don't regret it one day at all. So
we're glad you didn't regret it, because you've definitely had a very successful career thus far. And I know previous to the Bahamas National Trust, you actually worked at the Department of Marine Resources, correct?
Yes, and so once I finished with my degree, I immediately moved back home. I wanted to be home. I always wanted to be able to make a difference, where at home, and so it actually took me some time to get into the field, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, who's had the same story. So I worked in timeshare for 4 years in Freeport until I was able to find a job in the field. But my job search extended to Nassau, where I was able to pack up and relocate to New Providence to work with the Department of Marine Resources as an assistant fisheries officer. And I can tell you, working as a civil servant, the networking opportunities, training, it really helped with springboarding your career. And so I really enjoyed the time spent with the Department of Marine Resources working on not just projects within the department, but also regional projects that helped with tying into a lot of the regional organizations that we work with, and also working a lot with our conservation partners here in the Bahamas. And so from there, I was actually still working with BNT as a conservation partner in government. And I could recall, sitting in meetings and Eric saying, "You, whatever your name is," because, he can never remember names. He said, "You, whatever your name is, you're going to work for me one day." And I would brush it off. But when the opportunity came, he contacted me, and the then director of parks, who would have been Tamika Raming, contacted me saying that they were actually looking for someone to manage the Grand Bahama operations. And that sparked my interest, because at that point I was already in Nassau for about 6 years. And so I joined the organization as a parks planner, working within communities. And Lashanti, you know very well how that is, considering you're joining the BNT as a conservation planner. And from there, I became the director of parks for 6 years, and to where I am now as the executive director. Yes, and I agree with Trifecta Group Bahamas. Tamika really is the plug. She was a great mentor to me, joining the Bahamas National Trust during that time. So yeah, it was a journey. Worked and networked with a lot of persons, many of those who are also leading their organizations. So it has been a great opportunity and an honor to actually lead the Bahamas National Trust.
And we are excited about that. And I know when you mentioned that you worked at DMR, I found out after the fact, and I think you and I had spoken about this before, that you were actually a part of the lionfish project.
Yes.
And I was one of those conservation partners back when I worked at Dolphin Encounters. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember setting up a booth there. And I mean, unfortunately, our paths hadn't quite crossed yet. But can you tell us a bit about some of the impactful projects that you think that you had contributed to when you were at DMR, which I'm sure you've done so many, but what are some of the ones that are like the most impactful from your time at DMR?
So I would, and you were actually spot on. See, you're answering my questions for me. So I joined the Department of Marine Resources in 2007, which was during the early stages of the lionfish invasion in the Bahamas. And so this prompted the government to take action. And so working with the then College of the Bahamas, developing a national lionfish response plan. And so the project called for not only a great deal of data collection and fieldwork, but also extensive outreach and educational efforts with the fishing industry, the dive operators, but most importantly, amongst the conservation partners. So it gave the Bahamas high recognition as the leading country in the wider Caribbean to controlling the lionfish populations and the spread. And so I could recall, I mean, there was so much outreach, lionfish derbies, training on, the concept of removing the spines and the fact that it wasn't poisonous, it was venomous. It got to the point where I would be in the food store and kids would walk up on me and say, "Hey, you're the lionfish lady." And I'm looking around like, wow, yes, I guess that's who I am. And so I would say that was one of the most impactful projects working at the Department of Marine Resources. But from there, the Bahamas joined into a regional project with 4 other countries. So the Bahamas' focus would have been obviously lionfish control, and I served as the national project coordinator in the Bahamas. And so we've been doing quite a lot of, we did quite a lot of piloting work with testing the frequency of, yes, Graham Parrott, yes, this person is spot on. So testing the frequency of removals. So we had a better understanding of how often there needed to be active removals to be successful in terms of managing the populations. And so I think with those would have been the most impactful. And I have to wrap up this very important one on the Marine Reserve Network. A lot of the staff prior to my time, like Tamika Raming, like Eleanor Phillips, who would have taken the lead on conducting stakeholder engagement to establish the first set of marine reserves within the department. And so prior to me leaving the DMR, we would have been able to finally gazette the first 4 marine reserves under the Department of Marine Resources. So I would say those would have been the most impactful projects during my time at DMR.
And for the purposes of some of the viewers, can you explain what gazetting is?
Yes. So gazetting is the legal instrument in terms of making legislation. And so when you say something is gazetted, that means it was made into law. And so that was a huge accomplishment. I mean, there were things on the book from the early 1990s where, areas were proposed on the DMR, and, there was significant work, but it still needed, that piece to take it over the finish line. And we were really excited that we were able to get that done.
And when you mentioned it, and I just want to kind of emphasize the point that one of those key things that was needed was that stakeholder engagement. Yes. Because I think a lot of times, as we've discussed before within the sector, the public does not understand the power, that they have with their voice. And so stakeholder engagement is so important. And I just want to encourage people to stay involved and stay aware of what's going on as far as like our environment and the things that happen with our resources. So
I agree. And continue to speak up and speak out. We have learned so many lessons about, what not to do, right? and we've learned that we cannot sit behind a desk making decisions. We have to get into the public. We have to sit down and have the conversation. What does conservation mean? What areas on your island should be set aside for protection? And yes, we've gotten beaten up. I mean, it hasn't always been easy, but at the end of the day, it's an obligation. We have to come to some consensus on what where protected areas where they should be and how they should be managed. And so based on the lessons learned, we have been, as traveling throughout the country, having a better appreciation and value the opinions of the stakeholders and putting that into action for the expansion of the network. So that has been extremely important. And we will continue to do that, to have those hard conversations.
Yeah. And I love that you pointed out when it came to that lionfish project that the Bahamas was kind of one of those leading countries in the region. And I've been hearing a lot with a lot of the different conservation projects and actions that happen in the region. We really be at the top, like the Bahamas is really, I don't even want to say a trendsetter because it shouldn't just be seen as a trend, but I must applaud the country, all the government workers and all the conservation workers who really help to push these initiatives, because we always end up being the ones that other countries kind of follow behind to try and catch up sometimes with what we've been doing. But yeah, so let's just move into now, you leave DMR and now you started the Bahamas National Trust as a parks planner.
Mm-hmm. So as a parks planner, the role really requires, again, a lot of stakeholder engagement. for developing management plans for protected areas. Deciding on how sites should be managed, whether they should be zoned, what kind of rules and regulations should be put in place, what threats needs to be managed and how they will be managed. And then the other role, as I would have mentioned, would be because the parks plan is also responsible for helping to guide the process of designating new protected areas. And so that really involves collecting the data, so the science, to ensure that we have the justification to set aside particular areas, but also that, again, and I'm going to use this all the time, and again, the stakeholder engagement piece. So those are the two critical components required to advance protected areas. And so the parks planner role is to do just that, but also to help with working with the park managers with the implementation of management plans. And I can tell you, it really opened my eyes to the beauty that we have here in this country. A lot of people are they would prefer to hop on a plane, go overseas, on vacation, but the beauty is right here at home. Domestic vacations is what I'm encouraging people to do. Go and visit yes, it's costly, but it's worth every penny. Being able to really appreciate and value the Bahamas as a whole. And so I would say that has been truly a great experience in that regard as a parks planner. And then as the director of parks, that is where the real work. Not saying that as a parks planner, it's not you're not filled with a lot of tasks. But the parks plan is responsible for the largest department within the organization, parks.
Yeah.
And so enforcement and surveillance, natural resource management, managing invasive species, and so that was really incredible, especially with again forging relationships with government, working more closely with conservation partners, and on all of the islands where we have national parks, bridging the gaps between management with other local conservation organizations. And so it's been an experience. We still have a lot to do, not only as an organization, but as a country, with respect to working more closely together with respect to natural resource management. And there's so many opportunities right now for training, cross collaboration with training. And so we're really excited about a lot of the projects and initiatives that are currently in the pipeline.
And I'm sure those projects and initiatives will present more opportunities for others to join and help out and work with Bahamas National Trust. And I encourage anyone who may be out there looking, if you see that parks planner role being advertised, do it. It's such a
yes.
It sits in an amazing part of conservation where, like you said, you manage, collect data, but you also have these stakeholder engagements. It's such a full role, and maybe I'm just saying that because that was my role there, and I truly loved it. But I do think it gives you such a wide experience as far as when it comes to being in a conservation organization and the inner workings of how to move things through the government and just get things done, effectively. And I do want to just quickly point out a comment from one of our beloved past guests and conservation heroes, Jewel, who says, well said, Lakeshia Anderson-Rolle. Stakeholder engagement and relationship building is so important for this conservation work. And she experienced that firsthand, right, in your hometown of Grand Bahama.
Yes,
working with the Song Project. So I think as these initiatives and pipelines come through the pipeline, I'm excited to see what they are and definitely excited to share. And hopefully people will start getting more involved with some of the work that's happening.
Yeah, and if I may just add on, and thank you, Jewel, for sharing that comment. And just even piggybacking off some of the work that Jewel has led in East Grand Bahama. A lot of times, Bahamians, they don't understand what we do. They hear the Bahamas National Trust. Sometimes people actually are used to assume that we were actually like a bank of trust. But, they didn't quite understand that we are the National Park Service of the Bahamas. And understanding that the BNT, we were created at a time where, we didn't have a forestry unit. We didn't have the best commissioner or Department of Environmental Planning and Protection. So we have been the voice of the environment for 64 years. And so there has been, a misconception that, we would just just the National Conservation Organization, and never knew the significance of our work in terms of being the managers of the country's national park system. And so I always try at every opportunity to reiterate that, because we are now redoubling our focus on that. So I just wanted to make sure that plug was just dropped in just now.
Yeah, because it's definitely been a very interesting history of the relationship with the Bahamas National Trust and the people of the Bahamas. So yeah, it's definitely progressed in a great direction. And as you said, Jules' project was one of those ones that really kind of pushed that. But in your time at the Bahamas National Trust, during your parks planner role and director of parks, because you're still a little new, not too new actually, in the executive director role, it's been about 6 months now.
It's going on 6 months, yeah.
But what would you say is like one of the most impactful projects that you experienced during your time prior to becoming executive director?
So again, in my role as parks planner and director of parks, I think one of the first projects had to do with, and this was like when I was, green and BNT. We started working with the San Salvador Living Jewels on a CEPF project. I remember it so well because at that point we were really trying to advance the 5 national parks that have been proposed for quite some time. And so the project really helped with, again, raising awareness on the importance of these particular sites, why it should be protected. And it really brought us together in terms of the San Salvador Living Jewels, because we recognized that there was an opportunity for co-management in that space. From there, the CEPF grant also moved into a larger project. It was my second Jeff funded project, the Global Environment Facility. This was at the time when we had the National Implementation Support Program, or NISP. And so we worked very closely with the department. Listen, that's why I had to sound it out. We had the Department of Marine Resources, the Nature Conservancy, the Bahamas National Trust. We worked extremely close to advance the country's agenda. And I say the country's agenda because the government made the commitment at that time to meet some international commitments made. And so at that point, it was the 10%, meeting the 10% under the Convention of Biological Diversity, which we actually did in 2015. Awesome. Again, it called for stakeholder engagement. But I can tell you the project that really, brought us all together. And Lashanti, you were a part of that success. It would have been the Bahamas Protected Project, or Oceans 5. Listen, we traveled so many. We were living out of a suitcase. We were from Eleuthera to Cat Island to
Managua,
Abaco. We were here, there, and everywhere. We didn't make it to Rumkey. I think that was probably the only island.
Yeah, probably.
But we made a huge impact. We met with so many stakeholders. It was an opportunity for us to really start to build a relationship with fishermen who saw us as like the most. So we had trust issues, and we are still working on that. But it really helped us to sit down and to start to talk about what makes sense or what didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And that would have been for meeting the 20 by 20% goal. And while there's still more work to be done, it was a huge impact with how much we were able to accomplish. So I would say those would have been like high on the top of my list in terms of impactful projects during my time as a parks planner and director of parks.
Definitely. And we are excited to see some of the projects that come through in your new role. But before we even jump into that, I do want to ask, through your career thus far, do you think that there are any like common misconceptions that you've heard that Bahamians, or maybe even just people around the world, believe about what you do or your role in conservation?
This is a true story, although it's very funny. So I have a very close family member, and this is probably maybe only one that sticks out right now. I have a very close family member. I adore her greatly, who would introduce me to others as her cousin, the conch diver. And she was serious about it. And I kept asking, I said, excuse me, ma'am, I am not, my profession is not a conch diver. But all she knew was that, I was a certified diver. I was always on a boat somewhere on some island. She may have seen me with a photo with a conch at any given point, but she didn't understand what was taking place on those expeditions. So she just assumed, when we're out diving, we are like fishing. And so, people don't understand. We are actually collecting the data that informs the management of these critically important habitats and species. And so the misconception is, I mean, people just assume, that, we are just out there, saving the planet, not understanding the actions taken to get us to that point. And so I always try, and now my family, they get it, right? Because it took some time as well. We are natural resource managers, and we conduct field work, and when we're in the field, we are monitoring coral reefs, we are monitoring fish populations, we are monitoring the seabed, the seagrasses. So because we want to be able not just to protect, but inform how these areas should be managed. And so I always have like to share that story because for the longest I couldn't get her to understand it. So I was Lakeisha the conch diver for quite some time.
Yeah, and that reminds me how whenever someone used to ask Lindy what he did, he'd say, "Oh, I just count fish," and I'm like, "You gotta stop telling people that because they're gonna think that all you do is literally go out and count fish." So yeah, and I love that you put that. We're natural resource managers, and that encompasses almost everything that we do. But now that you've ascended to the throne of executive director, one of the things that I'm super curious about, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
You probably are, but go ahead.
When you maybe around the time when you first started, or maybe like halfway through your career, did you see yourself becoming executive director one day at any point? Not close to the time, because I know close to the time everyone was like, "Man, Eric getting ready to go. Who would be like? It might be Lakeshia. Lakeshia's the best candidate for this." But prior to Eric's announcement, right? Like, was there any point earlier on in your career where you said, "You know what? I want to do that. I want to be that one day"?
I'm gonna be open and honest with you, but no, this was not my goal. I am the one who I prefer to be behind the scenes, getting the job done, blood, sweat, and tears, when nobody has to know. Mm-hmm. So that has always been how I operate. And I've even told Eric on several occasions, back in the day, I don't want your job. And that I was just being frank because I love the field work. I miss being out on the boat and in the field. But it got to the point where when Eric would have announced his retirement, I got a lot of support from so many people. Like I was a bit overwhelmed because I guess I didn't realize people saw me the way they did. And even the staff, they were like, "So, I mean, this is a no-brainer, right? You're gonna apply."
It's not you, then who, right?
And so to answer your question, no, this was I was just always interested in being behind the scenes, pushing and getting the work done, and not being in the forefront of it all. But I realized that I had such a great support system that it was time for me to step up into the role because like you said, I mean, and I'm sure there could have been others, but I realized that it was time. I've been with the organization for 11 years prior to taking on the position. I know the operations, I know the team, and I know the vision. I know where we should be, and so why not take the mantle and lead the charge? And I can tell you, it has been. I won't lie, it has been extremely hard, a lot of work, but it has been a great experience. And so, as I continue to work through and work with our partners, and especially now as we continue one of the processes that we're leading, and I'll touch on that in part of the closing thoughts. I really want the BNT to be an inclusive organization. I want us to be better partners, working not just in New Providence and in Grand Bahama, but where even islands where we don't have national parks, because there's still so much potential. And I can tell you that I am prepared and I'm ready to continue in this role and in this capacity, and I'm very excited. So
I think everyone's excited. And like you said, it definitely was this attitude of, and this is not to discredit anyone who may have applied for the position. I'm sure there were a lot of viable candidates, but when it came to that natural fit and that natural transition or progression, just like, if not you, then who? So yeah, we're all thrilled to have you in this role and excited to see what comes. And so I will ask now, like, what do you see, because this is part 2 of the series that we had for season 7. So
okay.
shout out to Lynn, who, she took the initial step forward and did the national parks past and present. So where we're at now and where we're going, where do you see that? What is the vision that you see for national parks in the Bahamas?
So great question. So again, we are redoubling our focus to national parks. We've been doing a lot of work with, expansion of the protected area network. We've been conducting research or collecting data, in areas outside of national parks. We are bringing the focus back to our core mandate, back to basics, national park management. So more management plans, not only in place, but under implementation, more infrastructure to support visitation. And when we think about infrastructure, we also want and plan to work with communities and businesses to bring those businesses into national parks. And so developing commercial use programs, concessions, having more trained tour operators, even outsourcing our gift shops. We want to have direct benefits to local communities and business opportunities for them. We want to have more boats in the water, more boots on the ground. We want to see our park wardens trained and properly uniformed. Let me repeat that because I think you like that just now. Right? Trained and properly uniformed, a robust enforcement program, taking into consideration technology, using technology to help with supporting our work, and working more closely with communities. In our mandate, we are able to assign volunteer park wardens. So we want to be able to offer more opportunities, more economic opportunities, I should say, for Bahamians, but we want to start moving away from having so many paper parks to more actively managed and functional protected areas. And again, of course, this comes with more sustainable financing mechanisms. So we will be implementing more user fees, and even the parks where they don't exist now, we're going to be moving towards that. Persons need to understand that in order for us to maintain these unique and beautiful spaces, it comes with a cost. And everyone should be providing that cost. If you're using the national parks, you should be paying for the usage. Mm-hmm. And so we have an exciting opportunity here. And again, it has to do with bridging that gap, with having communities directly benefit from economic opportunities within and adjacent to protected areas.
I think you made such a great point. That reminds me of an interaction that I had with a fellow Bahamian who basically was just kind of like, oh, the boardwalk little breakup, bonefish, I was like, oh, are you a member? Of course they weren't, And I was like, the more people who are members, we can do things like repairs. And even another fun fact about being a member is you get access to these parks for free.
Correct.
And even another little known fact that I found out in my time there, when you have a membership at B&T, there are other national park or national trusts across the world that you actually can access for free with your B&T membership. For less than what you're probably paying for Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, you could be a member of the Bahamas National Trust. Help them, help your country, help us manage these natural resources, but also, you open up access to discounts across the country as well as just access to different places around the world, which leads me to my next question. How can viewers get involved with your work, following the work of the BNT, volunteering, internships, mentorships? Like where's the best place for someone to go to access this information?
So I would naturally direct them to our website. So please visit our website, www.bnt.bs. Sign up for membership. Once you sign up for membership, you're in our email list. So you receive updates as they come in. You receive trust notes. You receive information on our annual fundraisers. And since we're talking about fundraisers, may I please just share that this Saturday, June 10th, is the annual Cuban Pig Roast fundraiser. It's going to be held between 6:30 and 10:30 p.m. at the Palm, which is formerly the Philosophy Smokehouse in Western New Providence. Tickets sold and even raffle prizes and funds raised from the event will go towards the construction of the Welcome Center at Mariah Harbor Key National Park. We are now establishing an operations base. Since the park was created in 2002, this fundraiser will help us greatly with establishing our new building. And so please, and even if you're not able to attend the event, you can still donate towards the Welcome Center. So all of that information is on our website, www.bnt.bs. And also become a volunteer. And how can you do that? Grab some of your friends, some of your coworkers, send us an email. We'll be able to accommodate you at some of our priority work within national parks. Right now, if you're in New Providence, we have opportunities at Bonefish Pond with removing invasive plants, planting mangroves and other coastal plants. We have some great work going on here in Grand Bahama, also at Lakeshia National Park, but also around Nature Center. And so please take out, even if it's just a few hours on the weekend, please volunteer. We're a nonprofit, non-government membership organization. And so again, please become a member. It's inexpensive, and it's really critical to our work. Not only does it give us a greater voice, but it also helps with bringing in funds to support our operational needs. Internships, we do have annual internships. We have one at the Leon Levy Native Plant Preserve, which actually is starting this week. We also have our science team, our department that provides internships every summer. And so please visit the website, and you can also email us at bnt@bnt.com or parks@bnt.bs.
That was a lot of promotion. I'm excited. I'm going to be the pig roast, and
Awesome.
maybe if I'm feeling stuck, maybe I'll take someone with me. I should do like a raffle.
You should take someone with you as well.
Yeah. I should. Can't go to those kind of things alone. So thank
Bring
you.
your dancing shoes, though. It's gonna be a great night.
I believe you. I think the Cuban pig roast. I've only been fortunate enough to been to one, but it was actually a really great night, and I'm looking forward to this one. I think this is the first one in how many years, right? Because COVID kind of stopped it.
COVID kind of stopped it. We actually held one last year. Last year at the Mailers Farm, where we would typically host the event. And last year's fundraising goal was to support the predator control or invasive species program on Anagua, where we had a huge issue with wild hogs. With wild hogs basically destroying the flamingo rookery. So we were able to fundraise for $100,000 for the program. Our science team has been doing great work with the parks team in Anagua with setting up trail cameras using drone technology. We're going to be setting up traps. We want to be able to protect the flamingo populations. And so last year, we did have that. Last year would have been the first event since COVID. And then this year, again, we'll be focusing on infrastructure for Mariah Harbor Key National Park.
That's exciting. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing how much you guys raise. And we do have a question in the comments, which actually is a really good question. And I think this is another thing where common knowledge to us is just not so, we forget sometimes that other people aren't aware. And so D'Angelo asks, what is a paper park?
Okay. So a paper park is, it's a national park. Well, we have paper parks, we have paper protected areas. So essentially, they only have the legal designation. So yes, they have the legal authority. We have the legal authority for them to be a national park, but there's no active management. And so there's no staff, there's no infrastructure, there's no type of support. And so when I say paper park, it means moving away from paper parks to manage parks means we have staff in place, we have infrastructure to support the management, we have active management taking place. So that's the paper park. And that's a good question.
Yeah, and thank you for explaining that so well. And we do have a comment and question from Jewel. One of my favorite parks, the Lakeshia National Park, has this amazing boardwalk that gives donors and supporters the ability to etch their names on the boardwalk. Is this something that might be pushed more in the other parks around the country? It's an easy way to get the public actively engaging in the maintenance of small aspects of their parks. That's a wonderful suggestion.
It is. And if I may just share, so the BNT, we established a fundraiser to rebuild the boardwalk bridge at Lakeshia National Park. And I think the cost would have been somewhere in the $300,000 range. And so a part of that was if you donated a certain amount, your donation would also go towards putting your name on a plank on the boardwalk to show your support. And so yes, that opportunity can exist. I think, and you could even still take out a plank at Lakeshia National Park. $500 gets your name etched on the beautiful boardwalk that extends across Gold Rock Creek. And so, yes, those opportunities exist. They are great ways to fundraise and acknowledge the donors who support the work. So, yes, that is also an opportunity.
I love that. $500, you can have your name etched into the beautiful boardwalk. That's actually not too bad either if you really think about the impact that you're making. One plank will save a whole ankle, I promise you. So we have another question coming in from Shannon. Shannon asks, how are the park spaces designated? Example, can people pop up and have a picnic, or are they just used for self-guided park walks?
So you can actually book guided tours. That would have to be booked in advance. We do not yet have the mechanism for persons to walk in to have guided tours. But otherwise, they are self-guided. We do have quite a bit of interpretive signs, and in some parts, we also have pamphlets that can help you and your family as you take on a self-guided tour. Now, in terms of picnics, if you want to set up something very special, depending on where you are, you just call in advance. If you're in the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park and you want to have a beach picnic with tents and chairs, then there's a cost associated with that. And so it really all depends on where you are. But you can have picnics, you can do self-guided tours, but you can also book in advance to have a tour guided by one of the BNT staff members as well.
Yeah, I definitely, it sounds like everything is in the realm of possibilities. You have to just contact. Don't just go out there and do it, guys. There are certain parks that are very sensitive and you can't just go and pitch a tent anywhere. So definitely reach out to whichever national park headquarters is nearest to the area, and someone will be happy to assist you with figuring out what's the best way to go about doing something that you want to have done.
And again, I would say go to the website so you can determine where you want to visit. And send us an email.
Yeah. That's the email I put in up. What are we talking about on the website? We do have 2 more questions. Wow, people are really starting to trickle in. So we have Ricardo Rolle watching from YouTube. Ricardo asks, what are the early detection programs in place to address new or emerging invasive species? That's actually a really good question.
This is a very good question. And so our science team is responsible for monitoring. So for monitoring for species, whether it's for terrestrial, marine, and also habitats. So aside from that, the presence is really with the park staff. And so they are responsible for doing daily walkthroughs. We have issues with quite a number of invasive species. We have issues with some of the feral cats. We have issues with raccoons. We have issues, and even with some of the invasive plants. But again, it also has to do with training. So you have to be able to identify what's not native to understand and determine if it's invasive. And so we still have some work to do in that regard. And we also have issues with green iguanas. Let's not forget that.
Dun, dun,
Um,
yeah.
and so we do have what's called a national invasive species strategy that does require some updating, but that also has a training component or an identification manual. So a part of our orientation, we usually train our field staff with identifying the top invasives for the Bahamas.
That's awesome. And I think I sometimes forget, and you just gave me such an amazing reminder that there are a lot of brilliant Bahamians that are here, in the Bahamas that are so knowledgeable about plants, reptiles,
Yes.
marine creatures. It's really easy, I promise you, to get information from them on what is what when it comes to identifying species. They're very passionate about what they do, and they are more than happy to jump in the bush with you.
Oh
And
yeah. Take a photo and share it, and they can answer.
they happily will answer it with scientific names, I promise you. So definitely, and I'll put a little plug for the Beings group that has
Yes.
the Bahamians. Oh crap! These acronyms just get me every time.
Let's keep it at Bings right now.
Beings.
Beings.
There you go. And I do also want to point out a comment from Trifecta Group Bahamas, who is also our proud sponsor of this episode. They would like to make a donation towards the boardwalk restoration at Lakeshia National Park, and they will definitely reach out. And for those of you who might be joining a little late, like I said, Trifecta Group Bahamas has sponsored this episode, and they are a group that partners with local organizations to develop their triple bottom line by maximizing program and project benefits to communities and the environment. So definitely check out Trifecta Group Bahamas on all your social media handles. LinkedIn, Twitter, IG is Trifecta242, and Facebook is Trifecta Group 242.
I would also like to shout out Trifecta Group Bahamas for sponsoring this episode, but also for donations across the board. Awesome job.
Across the board walk?
Oh, don't worry. They said they'll reach out to us. If you don't, we will reach out to you.
Awesome. And Gloria gives another tip. There's also a website specifically for reporting green iguana sightings that's not managed by BNT. So yes, we do collaborate with other organizations. So please, Gloria, if you have that website, please feel free to pop it in the comments for other viewers to see, because green iguanas is a really, really big problem. And if you can, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot again, because I think a lot of people are always like, oh, but the green iguanas, they're so pretty. Don't we have iguanas here already? And I have to literally sit them down and say, let me tell you the tea on why. So if you can, and we'll start wrapping up now. I see we're at the 47-minute mark. Why are green iguanas so awful for our environment?
They outcompete our native, not only iguanas, but also some of our other reptiles. So I would say to you, yes, they are pretty. Well, to some they are pretty, but they are a nuisance. They also target eggs, bird eggs. So we want to make sure that, and this is so not only just green iguanas, but all invasive plants and animals, they outcompete with our native populations to the point where they can completely take over and can cause extinctions. So can you imagine losing some of the species that are known for the Bahamas endemic? So we want to make sure, and they populate listen, I think the biggest issue right now is in somewhere in Berry Islands. Can you imagine only seeing iguanas and you're not seeing your curly tailed lizards or any other species? So we want to get a handle on that. We want to get a handle on all of the top invasive species in the country. This requires a group effort, a countrywide effort, and obviously it requires us educating the public on why they need to take action, why they need to report it, why they need to help with collecting them when they see them. And so we want to make this a considered effort. We will have to encourage our government counterparts to take the lead, but the conservation arena stands by to assist. So hopefully there's going to be some more work in that regard. I do know that there's going to be work under the JAC 2020 project, but that focuses more on invasive plants, especially the casuarinas, especially the Brazilian pepper. And so there's a lot of work to be done in that regard, and a lot of raising awareness also a part of that project component. So look out for that as well.
Well, I'm excited for that because, as many of my viewers and other friends know, I have a personal vendetta against the casuarina trees.
ruined my ankle, ruined it, and they all deserve to be burnt and turned into coal for sustainable use.
They are good for burning. That is correct.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, I only have two more questions for you that I would love to hear your answers on. And the first being, and I think this is probably going to be a very powerful answer, so hopefully it resonates well. Who is someone in the sector, whether they're local or international, that inspires you and why?
Okay, so I'm going to mention two individuals. The first would have been my first boss in the field, Mr. Michael Brennan, who was a no-nonsense, straightforward, upfront gentleman. He gave me, on my first day, he gave me like some of the best advice that I stand by to this day. And it has a lot to do not only with your character, but how you conduct yourself as you continue to work through the various islands. He said, Lakeshia, never take a handout, because at some point, you are going to find yourself in a position where you don't want to be, basically. And I've been in situations where people attempted to do that, and I always kept remembering, and it still resonates with me, that no, I need to be careful, because at the end of the day, I could find myself in a position that can be detrimental to my career. The other person that I admire greatly would be Mrs. Eleanor Phillips. And I don't even need to explain it, but she is like the person who stands out in a room when she speaks. She's powerful. She is like a master fundraiser. She is a connector of people. She's a great networker, and she actually worked with Department of Marine Resources before I joined, and I had the opportunity to review her work. And from then, I was like, who is this woman? Is she still around? And so, her work ethic was always extremely impressive to me. And so I do call her my Shiro. She's a great mentor, and she's action oriented. She gets the job done. And so I would say that she is certainly one that truly inspires me.
Definitely. And they're both very, very well-known powerhouses in the sector. And both of them, unfortunately, I just missed with being able to work with. But their work obviously continues to shine through in their legacy, with you being one of those individuals that they have inspired. And you inspire others. I mean, you inspire me. I tell you that all the time. Like, my favorite director ever. Sorry to my other directors. You guys are great, but Lakeshia was the director of my lifetime.
Thank you.
So just the last question, which should be an easy one. If you could give us just final thoughts for our viewers, whether that be, a life lesson you learned from the field or just throughout your career, just some final thoughts to leave with viewers who may particularly be interested in just kind of doing the same thing that you do.
I actually want a final thought to be about what we're doing right now as an organization with the Bahamas National Trust. And the reason I choose to do this is because, again, I want to be all inclusive. Right now, the Bahamas National Trust, we are in our strategic planning phase. We do anticipate it will take the rest of 2023 to accomplish. And it's because we want to hear from you. We want to hear from not only the stakeholders that we work with, we want to hear from our partners in government. We want to hear from the stakeholders on the islands where we work and where we plan to work. We want to find out how the BNT can be more impactful. We want to collect this information on where should the BNT be in the next 5 years, because we want to gather that input to really help to shape our strategic plan and where we go in the next 5 years. And so I am reaching out to the masses, and yes, we will, do a more formal request for information. But I wanted to at least leave that as my final thought and as a touch point, because we want to hear from you. We want to know how, and we know we've been quite successful with a number of initiatives that we've led. And with park management, but we want to find out how the Bahamas National Trust to you can be more impactful in our work. And so if you're on this call and you have a thought right now, please send an email to parks@bnt.bs so we can hear from you. Whether you're a fisherman, whether you are a protected area practitioner or conservationist, we want to hear from everyone. We will be conducting listening tours. We're going to be visiting several islands. We've been to Abaco. We've been to Grand Bahama. We've been to Exuma. We're going to be headed to Andros. We've been to Anagua. We want to visit and we want to hear from you. This is your opportunity to help with shaping the direction we go in. And so we thank you for all that you've already done in terms of sharing input and advice. This is our time now to map out our 5-year journey, and we want to do that with all of you. So please share your thoughts to us. We appreciate it. We're thanking you in advance. And again, it's going to be a more formal process, but I at least wanted to hear from those listening to my voice today. If you can start sharing that information with us.
Beautiful. I love that as a final thought. And I won't even add any more to that except just thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out on your holiday weekend, right?
Yes, it's a holiday, right?
Right. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm happy that you were able to do this. Everything comes exactly when it's supposed to. So this was the perfect time for you to do this show. And I couldn't be more grateful to have had you. And I think this has been a wonderful episode. I look forward to watching you progress, in your role and just all the great work to come. And thank you to all the viewers.
Thank you, Lashanti. It was a pleasure. We have to do this again sometime. Viewers, thank you so much for the questions, the comments. Looking forward to hearing more from you as we continue this journey together.
Definitely. And I will see you all next week where we have another guest coming on Siren Sundays. Thanks for riding the wave with us. See you all then.
Take care.